How's it going? Today I want to make a video comparing my Land Cruiser to my 3rd gen 4Runner before I sell this thing, which is going to be happening pretty soon. I've owned 2 3rd gen 4Runners and a 1st gen Tacoma, and I actually got my 3rd gen 4Runner over a Land Cruiser 80 series initially, and then I ended up selling it and buying this thing. A lot of it had to do with not really knowing what these are about and the options that they have and why they're so amazing. So I just want to go over that, compare all the features between the two, drivability, off-road performance, all that, and leave you guys to make an educated decision. By the way, I'm pretty sick right now. That's why I'm home recording this video instead of at my job. So bear with me here. This is a 1996 Land Cruiser 80 series. 81 specifically. It is from Japan. It is a right-hand drive turbo diesel variant. Other than those two things, it is very similar to the American 80 series. These generally had a lot more features though, which is why I ended up picking this over an American. And then this is my 1998 4Runner, 3rd generation. It is bone stock. I bought this as a fixer-upper and a daily, but I've actually just been driving this everywhere because I love it so much. It's a limited. It has the 5VZFE V6 engine. It's pretty nice inside. It's clean. It has most of the good features like the rear locking differential, power seats, all that stuff. Let me just talk about the similarities real quick before we dive into all the discrepancies. So these are both obviously SUVs from Toyota from the 90s. They're both body on frame trucks without a bed. They both have 4-link suspension in the rear. They both have a rear solid axle. They both have a transfer case. They're four-wheel drive. This one's 4-wheel drive is more complicated, however. This one's regular part-time 4-wheel drive. In terms of differences, I could talk all day about them. The main things, however, that set these apart is that this is a heavy-duty off-road Toyota vehicle, and this is a light-duty. In terms of weight, this is quite a bit heavier. I think right now this is about 6,000 pounds, and this one is a little under 5,000. So a pretty big difference there. Size-wise, the wheelbase is almost identical, and height-wise as well. This is on 33-inch tires, but if it was on the stock 31s, I think they would be basically the same height. Very similar form factor. And this is actually one of the things that I overlooked when buying my 4Runner, because in my head, the Land Cruiser was always like a huge behemoth. But in reality, this thing on 33-inch tires with the lift is very similar. This width-wise, it has tires that are poking out a bit, different offset, but stock tires, stock height, these are pretty similar in terms of size. So don't let that turn you off. This is a rear and front solid axle. They are almost 1 tons. Toyota didn't call them that, but they're pretty close. The rear is a full float with a 9.5-inch ring gear. That's much bigger than the 4Runner. The towing capacity is 7,700 pounds from the factory. The axle is massive. It has extra armor. It's like reverse trussed a little bit. You can see the extra bumps there for support. Fully floating, meaning that the weight of the vehicle is not being pressed onto the axle shaft. It is being sent directly to the wheel. And the front is also a full float, solid axle. It is an 8-inch high pinion, which is also pretty great for off-roading. But actually, clearance-wise, from the ground to the bump of the diff, it's pretty similar to a stock 4Runner. These axles are not braking. It's going to be insanely hard to brake them on the trail, especially if you're running a small tire like a 33-inch. You can put 40s on these before they start to break and shred themselves on the trail. And that's before upgrades, drop-in upgrades. A 4Runner, on the other hand, has independent front suspension and an 8-inch rear diff. The rear diff on this 4Runner is weaker than the front diff on this Land Cruiser. And the front diff on this is sub 8-inch ring gear. It's pretty tiny, but you also have to remember that this weighs a lot less than the Land Cruiser. The engine is less powerful. It's meant to tow much less. Fully different purposes. Doesn't mean that you can't turn this into a really nimble off-roader, which I did in the past. I had a really nice modded 4Runner that's on my channel. If you, I'll link it up in the top, I guess. But you got CV axles with a tiny-ish diff. They're great for road handling and road driving. Much more stout on highways than the solid axle in the front. But if we're talking off-road performance, it's not even a fair comparison. Another big thing that sets us apart from the 4Runners or Prados is that the frame is fully boxed like a heavy-duty pickup truck. It is much stronger than the frame on the 4Runner. That obviously leads to an increased towing capacity, which is pretty nice to have. Much less likely to break something on the trail, like a shock mount or a link mount or anything like that. Another big thing that I appreciate a ton, the Land Cruiser has disc brakes on all 4 wheels. This has drum brakes in the rear. So swapping your brakes on this is really easy, and you got a lot more stopping power. And on the 4Runner, the brakes are just a bit tinier and less powerful, but you know, it's a light duty vehicle. One of the biggest things that sets the Land Cruiser apart from most 4Runners is that these are full-time 4-wheel drive, meaning that they do not have 2-wheel drive. They're always sending power to all 4 wheels. This means that it is basically all-wheel drive because the center diff is unlocked, so it can drive on roads without binding. This is really nice if you're going to be spending a lot of time off-road. You don't really have to worry about shifting into 4 high because it's already sending power to all 4. All you need to do is press the center diff lock button on the dash if you get into a little bit of trouble. Whereas on this, you have to shift into 4. It's not a big deal at all. And honestly, having 2-wheel drive for driving around the highways of the city is much better for fuel economy and power delivery. So that's a nice aspect of both of these cars. So obviously, durability wise, the Land Cruiser basically crushes the 4Runner in every category. If that is a priority for you, then obviously this would be the better choice. But if you want a more nimble, daily, tinier vehicle, and when I say tinier, I'm primarily talking about width wise, you know, this has a lot of ups. Let's talk about performance. These vehicles actually have pretty similar specs, which is kind of hilarious. This is a diesel, however, that is a gasser. This is the 4.2 liter 24 valve diesel called the 1HD FT. It is the more advanced of the 6-cylinder diesels, and it's the best diesel you can get in the 80 series. And this is the 5VZFE, which is also the best engine you can get in the 3rd gen 4Runner. It is a V6 gas, dual overhead cam, 24 valve. So kind of similar in some ways. Horsepower on this guy is about 180 horsepower. Same over here, but torque on this is less. This is about 280 foot-pounds, and this is less. I think it's like 220, if I'm not mistaken. So a bit of a difference there. This thing's pretty nice in first gear, even though it's heavy as shit. But overall, this is more zippy, especially because it has lighter street tires and the vehicle's lighter as a whole. In terms of miles per gallon, this thing actually gets better fuel economy. This diesel is pretty efficient for its day. It's about 30 years old. So I'd say maybe 20 miles per gallon on the highway. Not bad at all for something this big. That's probably a bit lower. This also has a much larger fuel tank at 24 gallons, where this guy is at, I think, 18.5. So you're using less fuel and you have much more fuel storage. And in some markets, you could actually get these with an auxiliary fuel tank from the factory. So all in all, for like long excursions, this has a 4Runner beat for sure. But for daily driving and zippiness, stock, this takes the cake. But is that really why you're here? No. This is a heavy-duty vehicle. As I mentioned previously, this was available with the inline 6 gasser, the 1FZ FE. Also a phenomenal engine. I don't think there's a big point in getting the gas if you're getting an import vehicle, because the gas one is available in every American 80 series. The diesel was never available in America, and that's one of the big things about getting an import Land Cruiser. So other than being insanely reliable, This thing will never break. It's very overbuilt. You got 2 huge batteries. You got a massive air filter. You got a massive fuel filter. You got a big oil filter. You have ABS on this model. I have cruise control, which is a very rare option. Mechanical fuel pump, very little electronics. I love this thing. Keep in mind that this is not OBD at all. You cannot hook up a diagnostic tool like a scan tool. You can hook up a diagnostic tool over here, but it's not something like OBD2 levels of detail. This, on the other hand, is a bit more modern. It's a electronic fuel injected engine. It has OBD2. It has a lot more electronics, ABS, cruise control, you know, all that good stuff. It's a pretty simple engine. It doesn't really need a lot of maintenance. Not to say this one does. This is a great engine. It's probably one of Toyota's best engines ever made. It's not necessarily special in any way, but it lasts. The only thing on this is a timing belt that you need to be careful about, but this is a non-interference engine, so even if it blows, it doesn't really matter that much. Overall, great engine, pretty solid horsepower. You can add a turbo kit or a supercharger if you need more power. Your miles per gallon is going to be crying though. This also has a timing belt. Unfortunately, it shouldn't, because it's a heavy-duty diesel. It should be gear-driven or something. But it also is super reliable. Nothing's going to break randomly. Since owning this car, it's been like 5 months. I've replaced the alternator that was going bad and not giving the right amount of volts. Other than that, I've had no problems, and I'm kind of rough on this thing. I do change the oil every 5,000 miles, pretty decent interval. I'm using really high quality oil. I'm using Toyota filters that cost a ton of money. But yeah, this thing, I have no fears whatsoever of something bad happening. All you have to do is keep up with your timing belt, and that's about it. In terms of sound, this takes the cake any day. This does have an exhaust on it. It's a 3-inch straight pipe-ish. Whereas this is stock. This sounds crazy. The turbo sounds amazing, blah, blah, blah. This doesn't sound special at all, but you know, you can change that if you need to. In terms of wow factor though, hearing a straight pipe turbo diesel on the streets is much more smile inducing in my opinion than hearing like a straight piped 6-cylinder gasser, you know. All right, let's talk about features, which is one of the biggest differences in between these cars. You know, we nuked Japan twice, so that's probably why they never sent any of the cool shit over to us. I don't blame them, honestly. I'd say this thing has around 2 times more features than the 4Runner. The only notable feature that the 4Runner has that this doesn't would be the roll down rear window, which is a pretty awesome feature. But this also has a lot of cool stuff going on in the back. Let's start up here though. You've got OEM headlight washers, which is pretty awesome for off-roading. Secondary mirrors to see where your lane is. You've got an electronic antenna that goes up and down. There's actually a cover in here that you pull over your radiator for cold weather so that your engine heats up faster. Pretty awesome. You got fog lights and primaries. These had the option for a PTO winch, which means that it is driven by a separate drive shaft coming out of the transfer case. So you could get from the factory a Toyota winch, steel cable, driven by the engine. It would be insanely powerful. Your turn signals are on the side as well as down on the bottom. Unfortunately, this does not have a cabin air filter. I actually installed one from Solve Function aftermarket that does have a cabin air filter. That's kind of big for dust. I don't know why these didn't have that, but you know, 90s. On a lot of these 80 series, you get power folding mirrors like this one. Super awesome feature. If you're out on the trail, you need to squeeze into a tight spot, you just press a little button. They are power mirrors as well, fully adjustable. They just don't have heat. And this actually does have the cold weather package as well. It has a fuel heater. It has a glow grid for the intake. It has heated seats as well. It does not have heated mirrors though, unfortunately. Locking gas caps, pretty awesome. I live in Seattle, so this is kind of tweaker proof unless they get a crowbar in there. The 4Runner does as well. That's kind of a big deal. You've got vents for redirecting air to keep dust off the rear window. They work pretty well. And this wing also, that's not really a wing, spoiler. This spoiler also kind of helps with airflow, I believe. This was optioned with the rear tire swing out, which is really cool. A lot of 80 series do not have this. No 80 series in America has this, but this can hold up to a 37-inch tire. It has a really simple locking mechanism. It just clips in, super stout. Backup key unlock, license plate, side mounted with lights on it. Pretty great. You have a third brake light up there. Yeah, feature wise on the exterior, even this thing is just jam-packed with stuff. Water fording wise, as I mentioned before, this thing has OEM rear and front diff breathers that actually raise it up a decent amount. The intake is way up here in its own little air pocket. You can wait a little bit. The cabin air breather, whatever, is up here on both sides, so you can wade pretty high without too much water ingress. On the 4Runner, the cabin air vent is under here, pretty low to the ground. No diff breathers. The doors on these are harder to close because they're actually more watertight. They have thicker rubber gaskets that keep the water out better. That's something interesting. This one came OEM with the big bubble rain deflectors, so you can have your windows open a little bit when it's raining. It has a sunroof with tilt. Yeah, this thing is feature rich. This has a lot of similar stuff. It does, since it's a limited edition or a limited package, it has the sunroof, has the roll down rear window, which all 4Runners have. But you're not going to see anything cool like headlight cleaners or folding mirrors or heated seats or tire swing outs. You know, that's the Hilux Surf has things like that. This thing does not. It's a lot more bare bones. Let's step into the interior here, talk about what's going on. This is basically stock. The only thing I have is this dual gauge pod. I have a boost gauge and I'm waiting for my EGT to come. And before anyone tells you to be careful about right-hand drive, I got used to this thing in like under a week and I love it. I'm fully ambidextrous now. I can switch between these and stay in my lanes and it just feels natural. So believe in yourself. You can get used to this in an instant if you need to. All right, in terms of interior features, we got a lot here. Still have the power windows, power locks, which is great. This is super cool. Altimeter and compass, love it. You got your sunroof with tilt. You've got a lot more hand grabs than a 4Runner, including these, which are pretty awesome. You have more cup holders. You got 1, 2, 3, and 4 right here. You got your center diff lock, antenna controls. You have suspension modes, which never came in any 4Runner. This actually doesn't work right now, but you can change it if you want to on most 80 series from Japan. You have a rear heater, also comes in the 4Runner. I have a CarPlay, like 6-inch display here. I've got heated seats with actually a low and a high mode. This is OEM, pretty rare option package. These do come with heated seats, so this one does not, but they're only on and off. They don't have any high and low selections. And this might have been where an auxiliary fuel tank button would be, which would be such a cool option. Usually only Australian rigs have those though. Up here, you've got a lot more going on than the 4Runner. You've got your oil pressure, your battery voltage, and a light to tell you your alternator status. You've got your timing belt change interval reminder light, which is super awesome. And you have an overboost for the turbo. Over here, you got some cool stuff as well. You got your fog lights. You got your headlight cleaners, your mirror retract button, controls, and you got space for 2 more things. Down here, you got an idle up, so you can actually change the idle RPMs of the engine to generate more power through the alternator. Another big thing, these did come in manual. They're super rare, but you can actually buy a kit with the trans and all the pedals and stuff, and you can swap it in, which is what I plan on doing in the future. Just really levels up the driving experience. Over here, you got your shifter. It's quite a bit different than the 4Runner. We're in high right now. This thing's always in 4-wheel drive since it's a full-time 4x4 rig. So we're in high, all-wheel drive, unlock center diff. You can put it in neutral or you can put it in low when the vehicle's stopped. And you got your standard shifter over here. You got your ECT power for the auto transmission, changes the shifting, and you have a second start button, which is pretty nice. Basically, this is for super low traction environments like snow and ice. You can press this and the transmission skips over first gear and only starts in second gear. And of course, you got your overdrive off. This is only a 4-speed. There's a lot more to be desired. Some of these even came with a center console fridge that actually can make ice cubes, which is amazing. You can like put your drinks in there and just take them out when they're ice cold on the trail. In the back here, really all over the car, you've got nice cloth seats. These are much nicer than the 4Runner. Even though the 4Runner is leather, I actually prefer these. I like the vintage cloth. They're pretty detailed and high quality. You got a few power controls over here. Everything else is manual. Dual storage up here, pretty nice. In the back here, you've got folding seats with 2 armrests. The 4Runner does not have armrests. These are actually pretty nice for your rear passengers. You got ashtrays everywhere because these Japanese smoke like a freaking campfire. Someone did smoke in this as well. That's basically going to be every car you get from Japan. It's whatever. It is nighttime. I forgot to add something when I was editing the video. One of my favorite features, okay? With your headlights on, turn signal, it actually lights up the side of the car that you're turning on. The fact that they thought about that 30 years ago just shows their amazing attention to detail. Also, OEM key fob, lock and unlock. Even some 4Runners don't come with that. Back to the rear again. It's a tailgate, technically. I think it has like a 250 kilogram limit. That's like 500 bald eagles or something. I love the tailgate. I like it more than having this big hatch, just because you can sit on this and you can extend your workspace or your sleeping area. And then you got this up here to protect you from the rain. So it's really nice, actually. I love it. These Land Cruisers had a better audio system. They have like 11 speakers or 10, I think, including a subwoofer. You have more interior dome lights. You have an option for 3rd row seating. You have options for JDM, curtains and stuff for sleeping back here. There's just a lot more. There's a lot more going on back here. And, you know, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is that this was built for use in Africa and the Middle East, in places where there's no parts, no time for maintenance, super rough trails, like no asphalt anywhere. And this was kind of made for your everyday American to go to work and go to the mountains once in a while, you know? So it seems kind of like an unfair comparison, but I actually chose this over that about a year ago, and then I made the switch. So if I would have known more about this thing, I would have gotten this first and saved some money. In terms of off-road capability, it's not even close. Even this base model-ish that does not have locking diffs, it still has a rear limited slip differential. Still keeps traction going when one wheel's in the air. This thing can go anywhere. It's amazing. The flex is crazy compared to the 4Runner. Even stock, with stock springs, stock height, it flexes pretty well. You've got OEM axle breathers for water fording on the front and the rear axle. This was offered from the factory with a front, center, and rear locking differential. I do not have that because I'm not super rich. I have the more base model. But if you did get the triple locked variant of this Land Cruiser, this thing will literally go anywhere. You're going to be keeping up with whoever you want. All you got to do is put on a lift kit, because that's not a ton of clearance, but you know, after that you're set. This thing came with a rear diff lock. A lot of them don't have lockers. Some of them have a center and rear locker for all-wheel drive, but this just has the rear. That's pretty good. The flex is not as crazy. The clearance is okay. This thing does fine off-road. If you took these both together off-road right now, they'd primarily be able to do the same things. The 4Runner would just lack in a few areas and maybe get left behind once in a while. They're both great vehicles. This one is just much heavier duty and meant for serious off-roading and exploration. The 4Runner is also pretty awesome. A lot of people love the rear rolling down window, which is really great. On this model, you got the cargo privacy cover, leather interior. This one's actually in really good shape on the inside. I'm trying to sell it if you're interested. Seattle area. The interior is tinier than the Land Cruiser. There's a dead bee. Damn. It's okay, it's a yellow jacket. You have less hand grabs. There's less off-roading related features, you know. It's what you'd expect. This car is also much cheaper than the Land Cruiser. In terms of bang for buck, this has a Land Cruiser beat. Power seats though, for the passenger and driver, full power seats. That's one thing that the Land Cruiser does not have. And an OBD2 port, also pretty useful. Let's talk about Modability and the aftermarket parts community for these vehicles. They're both huge. Just depends what type of 80 you get. In the US, there's tons of companies that make stuff for these 4Runners of any year, any generation. I was able to mod mine super easily. Wasn't too expensive. Thousands of forum posts on these. Any issue you could have with this, you can resolve. You can go to AutoZone, you can get spare parts, blah, blah, blah. This is different. If you buy one of these, you got to be at least somewhat committed. Most of the stuff you're going to be getting for this, aside from very simple stuff, is going to be from Japan or Australia. It's not necessarily cheap. I would always recommend going OEM Toyota. You do not want any of the Chinesium bullshit. It's just going to break and set you back even more. However, this is still an 80 series. At the core, it shares most parts with the American 80 series. You can still go to AutoZone and get parts for this. Engine related stuff, no. If it's a diesel, if it's the gasser though, yes, it's going to be the same engine as the American 80 series. My alternator, I had to buy from overseas. My oil filters are special. They're not the gasser ones. They're much larger. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of aftermarket for the 80 series, there's also a ton. There's tons of companies that make stuff for these. Armor, engine modifications, all that stuff. If you're getting one that's a turbo diesel, however, and you want more horsepower, which is the road I'm going down right now, you're going to be buying basically all your stuff from Australia. That's where the boys over there play with these things hard. They turn them up to like 300 horsepower, 500 foot-pounds. Pretty awesome stuff. That's what I want to do sometime. But in the Seattle area, and really generally in Washington and Oregon, there's a lot of JDM support. However, we have some big seaports here that a lot of the JDM cars come in through. So there's a decent amount of companies here that actually specialize in JDM cruisers. They might have parts on hand and they have knowledge. If you are in America though, and you want an American 80 series and you're gauging whether you should get an American 80 series versus a American 4Runner, the price becomes a lot more competitive. You can find 80 series in America for like $10,000, maybe a bit less if they're kind of ran through. You can find nice third gen 4Runners for $10,000, $15,000, especially modded ones. So the price kind of overlaps a bit. I would still always go with the 80. As a base platform, it's much tougher. It's ready for abuse. Basically, it's not going to be breaking stuff that much compared to the 4Runner. So just food for thought. And obviously, in terms of the wow factor, I don't drive this thing without being talked to. At gas stations, parking random spots, on the streets, everyone is always going to be looking at you, wondering why the heck you're on the opposite side of the car, steering wrong. They're going to be wondering why I have a Japanese plate, or, you know, some of the Toyota guys that know their stuff wondering why it has a turbo badge on it. These things are head turners, especially if you get a nice exhaust system and they're built for off-roading a bit. They just don't really exist here that much. There's probably less than 1,000 in the state, if we're being honest. They look freaking awesome. They just do. So real quickly, let me just recap. In terms of durability, Land Cruiser has it beat by a landslide. In terms of daily drivability, stock 4Runner is going to be zippier and easier to drive on the streets than this thing. Off-road ability, this thing beats it by a landslide. Wow factor, this thing beats it by a landslide. Price, initial price, this thing beats it. This is much cheaper, usually 4 times cheaper than a JDM. Maintenance cost and the cost to own it per year, this thing has the Land Cruiser beat. This thing is pretty expensive once you start ordering parts from overseas. This thing is pretty inexpensive. Reliability, they're both very similar. I would say though that the Land Cruiser is more reliable just because the parts are generally beefier and they're meant to last in areas of the world that do not practice maintenance like Americans do, or the parts literally are not available. For that reason, I would say that this is generally more reliable. Wow factor, obviously Land Cruiser has a beat. In terms of engines and power potential, I would say the Land Cruiser has it beats. The engine in here is awesome. It is super reliable, one of the best engines Toyota's ever made. It can be very powerful when tuned. It sounds amazing, and it's very easy to work on, especially because it has almost no electronics. In terms of fuel efficiency, Land Cruiser has it beat, unless you're getting 40-inch tires or something. In terms of features, whether it be interior or exterior, Land Cruiser has the 4Runner beat by a long shot. In terms of modability, I would say they are very similar. They both have so much aftermarket support, but when we're talking about outcomes, how capable this vehicle could be when it's modded to the maximum versus this, I would say the Land Cruiser has it in the bag. Ladies and gentlemen, overall, I'm taking the Land Cruiser any day. Doesn't mean you should. Doesn't mean the 4Runner is not good. The 4Runner is an amazing vehicle and it's very proven off-road. They're just for different roles. This is more hardcore, less easy to daily drive, more expensive, cooler, subjectively. I don't need to repeat everything. I just want to provide you guys information that you might not be able to come across as easily online, kind of put it in one area, and then you can decide what you want. However, I will say that every year that goes on, 80 series are going to be less and less available, more and more expensive, and they're going to be increasingly in less desirable of a state when you buy them. The 25-year import law in the US means that you can, right now in 2025, import a vehicle from 2000, which is now getting into the 100 series Land Cruiser territory. The 80 series is from 1990 to 1997. So any 80 series in Japan right now, you can import, which means that the good ones are probably already imported and bought up by some rich guy who's going to drive it twice a year. So the time is now to get one of these. In 10 years, these things are going to be insanely rare, very expensive, and the parts might be almost non-existent. The time is now if you want one of these, is what I'm saying. 4Runners, however, these are mass-produced in the US. There's millions of them. People are selling these left and right. A lot of the good ones are kind of bought up, and, you know, it's kind of leaning into a collector's car, you know, because this thing's like 27 years old. It's a Toyota Classic. What can I say? So also, if you want one of these, do not wait. You should buy one before the prices explode again, or they just all get kind of swooped up. So, two amazing cars, one amazing company, two kind of different philosophies. The choice is yours. Take care, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I probably missed a decent amount of stuff. I might kind of type some stuff on screen to let you know. But yeah, take care. Also, this thing is the non-EGR variant, so it has no emissions, and it can roll coal. It also smells like shit.